Hi, thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Telling Your Story in Turbulent Times. I'm Sheridan Orr, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Built-In, and I'll be your quasi-Oprah today, or at least your hostess. I'm super excited about the panel we have for you. We're going to give everybody a couple more minutes to get in, so we'll start at 2 after the hour. So grab a cup of coffee and get ready to join us. If you're just logging in right now, we're going to give other people about another minute to get on online, and then we'll get started. So thank you so much for joining us. I did already get a question, so thank you so much, Ashley. And the question was, will we be sharing the slides afterwards? And the answer is yes, but there are only about 3 slides. It's more of a conversation, and we'll also share the recording for that too. So. Okay, it's 2 after the hour. Thank you so much for joining us today for Built-In Presents, Telling Your Story in Turbulent Times. We have a really exciting panel, and I'm looking forward to introducing them. I'm Sheridan Orr. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Built-In. I have been here 60 days, just moved to Chicago from New York, so it's a pretty dreary day here in Wrigleyville, but we're excited to talk with you about this topic. So for those of you who don't know who Built-In is a recruitment platform, and we have over 1,100 customers serving companies of all sizes. And we really focus on tech jobs and really some of the most sought after talent. Over 1.7 million of those professionals visit our site every month. And we really help brands like yours tell stories of their employment brand and their technology and what it's like to work there, and especially your culture. So before we kind of dive in, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. First, there's a Q&A feature. You can use the chat. We will take questions throughout the presentation, but we'll also have some time for you at the end if you want clarification. So feel free to ask any questions. We've already had one question about the slides. There are very few slides, but we'll absolutely share them with you. It's more of a conversation, but we will share the recording and some of the content that really shaped this conversation. So look for that in your email following the webinar. If you're a Twitter person and you want to share your thoughts or insights, we'd love to hear from you. We'll be capturing those and responding and sharing. So use the hashtag #EmployerBrandNow. And so the first thing I want to do is kind of start off with a poll. We have a wonderful producer behind the scenes. So Kelsey, if you don't mind, we'll start with that poll. So we've talked to quite a few people in the talent acquisition space, and they really fall into 2 buckets. Are you playing defense and just trying to keep candidates warm, really focusing on telling your culture story, brand story? Or are you on offense? Are you out there trying to acquire some of that hard to get talent, or you haven't really been affected? This is something that's really stoked a lot of conversations with our clients and prospects. And, we'd love to just share the answer with you. So are you playing offense or defense during this time? All right, so how does it look, Kelsey? What are people saying? So I think it's about half and half. So we have 53% of you are playing offense and really focusing on some of those hard to acquire roles, and 47% of you are playing defense. And what I'm super excited about is that we have a wonderful panel today of people who represent software platforms, you know, essential businesses, software consultancies, and media platforms. So I'm really excited to hear how each of them is addressing this, and I think you all will be. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists. So first we have Rian Finnegan, who is the Senior Manager of Employer Brand and Recruitment Marketing at Instacart. And Rian, I'd love to thank you. First of all, you've saved my life during this time, and mostly because you're delivering to my mother, which means I don't have to do that. So I really appreciate you and everything that Instacart is doing. Also, we have Kate Manthei, who's the Employer Brand and Recruitment Marketing Leader for North America at ThoughtWorks, which is a global consultancy. And I'm really excited to hear what Kate has to say. We have Anna Sayre coming to you from the beautiful Catskills. And she's the Director of Employer Brand Marketing at the Trade Desk. And then we have Nicole Parish, who's Head of Global Talent and Brand Attraction Lead at Qualtrics. So thank you so much for joining us. And I think our topic's going to be really exciting. So I think many of us are already convicted that employer brand is important, but is it more important than ever now? And that's really kind of what we want to dig into today. And it's not really despite of the current challenges, but because of them, that people are really looking to brands like are represented on this panel for confidence and really to tell their consumer story through their employees. So stay tuned, we're getting really excited. We're gonna start now. So first of all, I wanna make sure we all have the same definition of what is an employer brand. And I'd just love to ask our panelists really quickly, starting with you, Nicole, like, can you share what you define as an employer brand and how you define it?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we kind of look at the full cycle from attraction through to alumni is sort of the talent brand piece. And for us, employer brand is really the experience from the moment someone becomes a candidate until they become an alumni. And it reflects for us how you act as an employer, and it influences the overarching talent brand, but it also is a part of influencing consumer brand, your attraction behaviors, and the values that you tend to demonstrate through attraction, and then obviously the experiences that your alumni have as well. So employer brand is kind of a just big piece of that.
That's great. So Kate, what do you think? What's an employer brand and how do you define it?
Yeah, so at ThoughtWorks, we're, I guess, fortunate enough to have a rich culture that has, steeped for 25 plus years. But I think our employer brand is, really the reason why people join, the reason why people stay. But then beyond that, kind of how Nicole described is, the way that people stay connected and, what they think and feel about us. So not only just our employees or, alumni, but potential job seekers and even just people in the industry and what, how they feel about us and what they think about us as a company and our values.
Great. How about you, Anna?
Yeah, I love this question. When I first got into this space, I was a little bit daunted by the various definitions. What is employee versus employer versus employment branding? And so the way I think about it is really simple. It's telling what makes the trade desk culture awesome internally to engage employees that we currently have, and externally to recruit awesome talent that will take us to the next level.
Great. And my friend Ryan, who saved my relationship with my mother, like, what's the employer brand?
I can't say too much more than already's been said by everyone on this panel, but really, like, I love the SHRM definition of it, which is employer brand encompasses an organization's mission, values, culture, personality. And, to Anna's point too, it's all about communicating to people who you want to come work at your company, So the attraction piece, that retention piece of, a similar vernacular, tone, feel, way that you communicate with employees at your company. And then of course, when folks exit, that alumni network is really important too. So just making sure everyone has the same sort of language, same sort of way of speaking about the company, and everyone's aware of the great work that you're doing internally and what makes your culture unique.
Perfect. So this next question is really something I'm super passionate about, and it's the intersection between your consumer brand and your employer brand. And what I've loved is watching the latest commercials. So the Amazon commercial where they're featuring how they treat their employees. I mean, that's their primetime ad right now. So it's definitely moved up to the forefront. So with knowing that employer brands can have a significant impact on consumer brands, and our employees have a louder megaphone than they've ever had before with social media. And consumers are paying attention. So how has your company come to embrace this idea? And I'll start with you again, Nicole. I promise I'll shake up the order.
It's totally fine. I think, we've really seen across Qualtrics just understanding innately that employee experience is tied directly to customer experience. And so, what we're working on really right now is growing the understanding that it's more on how you can authentically leverage that and sort of watching those two pieces come together. So, it's everything from just seeing a company-wide support for employee amplification and really educating the team on, hey, here's how you do social well for your own brand, let alone its impacts on our consumer and our talent brand, through to, when our chief people officer and our global talent brand manager sit on sales calls, they're all involved in these cycles together. And so we're seeing these really start to play together.
Rian, you have an interesting perspective on this because some of the people who work for you don't actually work for you. They're independent contractors. So I'd love to know, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the benefits about where I sit within Instacart is I'm on the comms team, and our comms team is about 15 people, and we have different areas that we focus on. So from shopper to corporate communications to retailer communications to consumer PR sits on our team and does, all of our social channels from the, the main company handle perspective. And then our team is in employer brand, employee engagement, and social impact. And so on our team sits, internal communications and, external communications as it relates to employees, current employees, potential employees, former employees. And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's like, it's all the same brand, it's different lenses and different levels of access to that brand in terms of what you're sharing with your employees, with contractors, with potential employees, with the industry, with consumers, but it all should be connected. And I think it's really important, especially in a time like this, to make sure everything is interconnected. We're really big about amplifying the employee voice right now. And so we have a program internally called Share It Carrots, where we're basically encouraging our employees and the employees that we know are top social influencers based on their scores from LinkedIn Elevate. And we tap them and say like, hey, can you share this out in a bi-weekly Slack or a weekly newsletter, just about what's important, what's the tone, how do we want to hit it. And our employees are really proud to be working at Instacart right now and feeling like a really great sense of responsibility to make sure that we're talking about what we're doing and keeping the company going during this busy time. So yeah, it's been really exciting to see our employees really wanting to be the brand ambassadors right now too. And I think right now is a critical time for companies to be leveraging that.
That's really important. So Anna, I'd love to know how you were thinking about flipping the script and really leveraging the voice of your employees to kind of bolster your consumer stories. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I love what Rian said about leveraging Elevate. And what we've done is made it super easy for everyone to share. So there is kind of analytics behind top shares, but really ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to share content that's both relevant to their role and their own career path, so that there's a twofold benefit. One is they're the champions of our message out into their broad networks, but also they're getting a chance to really hone their own personal brand. And part of what we do is say, let's take time and give recommendations to the employees and the teammates that we love working with. So not only are you sharing the company voice, but you're broadening your personal brand and then the personal brand of your teammates.
Great. How about you, Kate?
I'll kind of jump on what Anna was saying. We've again also flipped the script, really making our employees the brand ambassadors, and enabling them with the content. And within the past couple of months, enabling with the content that, kind of the world needs to see. So it's reflecting our culture, but it's also reflecting our personalities. Everything from what are you doing, during lockdown, and how are you, fostering your career to grow, and other things that kind of highlight both individuals, but also our culture as a company. And again, utilizing tools like LinkedIn Elevate, RIP, but, we've even created a top 10 list that, how can you be a brand ambassador? So it's anything from, your own personal social networks to within your network within the company.
That's so exciting. So when I first started in marketing, like back in the dark ages, there were only approved spokespeople. Like you had to go through an incredible system to allow certain employees to even speak to the local chamber of commerce. Is this a permanent change that we're going to let employees speak out and we're going to empower them, or is this just for now? I'd love. Since Kate, you're the last person, I'm just going to direct that right at you.
We've got a unique culture where we've always been able to use our voices. There hasn't been a corporate brand guidelines up until recently, really. So we've kind of probably been on the other side where it's been, kind of reining some of that, passion in. But I think it's, we see that it influences our clients and our customers. A lot of our culture as a company definitely rubs off more than just our technical skills and what we're doing technically within those clients. It's actually a lot of how we are as an organization, which sometimes is actually more valuable result of any of our engagements.
So now moving on to another question, I would love to know, we hear recruitment marketing and employer brand, and sometimes they're interchangeable and sometimes they're completely different things in different departments. And so I'm going to start with you, Anna. What do you think the difference is? How do you define them? And then how do you manage each of those differently?
Yeah, great question. So I sit in the marketing organization and the HR team are my partners. They're almost my clients internally. And there's a talent acquisition team that really directs the recruitment messaging. And we work together to look at the candidate journey and the experience along the way and what messages we need to tailor for each audience. And then internally, we have an employee engagement team, and that's a separate team, but we work together on initiatives like Take Your Kids to Work Day, or we have a fun Slack channel at home with the trade desk where people are sharing different challenges each week. So for me, it's really about keeping it simple. Recruitment marketing is the talent that you want to get to join the company in the future, and engagement is your current employees.
Perfect. I'd love to know what you think, Nicole. What's the difference? Because I think you're at the top of the talent attraction funnel. So what do you think?
I think, employer branding simply is, you have a brand as an employer, and either you're managing it or you're not. Recruitment marketing is really how you're putting that to work at different points in time, whether or not you are doing some, hardcore selling work to a specific group of people that you want to entice to your company, or whether or not you're simply socializing the concept of your culture and what it is to be a part of your business to a consumer or to an employee. I think that's kind of, I look at recruitment marketing as the tool to narrate and vocalize your employment brand at different points.
Rian, does that change for you since you sit in the comm side? Do you think of them as different things?
What's interesting is I think this role could sit anywhere within any team. You still have to work with HR, you still have to work with design, you still have to work with marketing, you still have to work with comms, you still have to work with talent. And so I think it's just, there's pros and cons of wherever you sit, depending on how big are your budgets, what are the resources you have, what is the level of, what kind of seats at the table do you have? And, so the way that I think of, employer brand, it's not, I come from a B2C marketing background. And so I think it's no different than B2B or B2C marketing. So you have like with B2C marketing, you have the consumer brand. Then you have consumer marketing, which basically drives that out to the different channels and the different audiences you want to reach, and hopefully get some like leads and get some, generation from that way, get some sales, increase revenue, whatever that is. And then you have the comms team that helps with the messaging and to craft the messaging and to make sure that messaging is tight. And then all of that is to market the product, and the product that you're marketing from an employer brand perspective is your culture. And so it's no different. And so I find that analogy to be really helpful. When talking about it internally. Unfortunately, for a lot of talent brand professionals, we are the only one, and other like brand teams are quite large. And so we have to call in a lot of favors to different departments and basically sort of like cobble together like a whole, brand functionality and marketing functionality for a company. But it's essentially the same thing that you would find with B2C or B2B marketing.
That is wonderful. So I am actually going to interrupt the flow because we have some really wonderful questions. So ready for lightning round here. And this actually leads us into the next part of the discussion, which is about segmentation. But James would love to know what happens if you have a strong brand in one domain. So for example, you are really strong with chemical engineering professionals, but maybe sales and marketing doesn't know about you. How do you like kind of really make sure that your brand has a voice for each one of your audiences or segments? And I am going to stick with you, Ryan, since we're already talking.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to go about that and how I would approach that is making sure that you're actually spending time with those employees and those leaders and what's happening within those departments at your company. And then part of our role too is like we're also journalists, so we'll have to go in and mine this cool like information, like what's actually happening over there, and then be like, where do you all hang out online? Because like I don't know, and like we have to get this information, we got to write the story, and we got to make sure to push that out to the actual relevant markets where these people are. So it's like not just the branding, but it's also the external push of it, and then also making sure you're communicating that internally too. So if you have chemical engineering professionals that are aware of your company, but you want more salespeople, like find the salespeople at your company, tell their story, make sure that they know what to talk about on their own networks, and then push that out to the right channels.
Kate, I see you nodding. Would you like to add anything about helping amplify brand to certain audiences and segments?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely face that issue that we are very, very well known in certain networks, but I think there's also, from at least the recruitment marketing standpoint, that we have to be okay that we can't boil the ocean with some of our messaging. So although, some people know us and it's a household name, we still need to do the activities to attract them. But then, also looking at being intentional about broadening that message, but being okay with the fact that maybe we aren't going to be maybe a household brand name to every single person. And that's okay. But making sure that it does start becoming influential to the networks that we're looking for, or like the candidates that we're looking for, and making sure within those networks the culture is spread throughout.
Great. So the next question we really had was about segmentation. And do you really, and I think Ryan said it really well, you have to figure out which stories and channels you want to use to get different types of constituents. But do you change that at all for, say, Gen Z to boomers? Like, do you change it for your audience at all? And I'm going to go to you, Nicole.
I think what we tend to see is less around necessarily the generational side of things, and trying to be more responsive to the needs and expectations of the groups that we're trying to talk to. So it's more segmenting our messaging around, hey, is someone looking for impact in their career? Are they trying to find a place that is going to give them growth, or are they looking for culture in particular? And to try and call out the stories that follow those kinds of storylines, and change our messaging more in that sort of manner, where it's a little bit more agnostic across multiple generations, but it's speaking to something that's more of that kind of intimate way that a person might interact with an employer. They're looking for something that's pretty big for them to make a decision to move to you. So we try to work towards those themes and change our messaging there more so than kind of on a generational divide.
Anna, it looks like you have something that you'd love to add to this conversation about.
Yeah, I love what Nicole said. We find it too, it's really different based on the role. So there'll be certain messages that will unite everyone: purpose, culture, values. But our engineering team is going to be more motivated by the scale and working at up to 11 million QPS, or solving the big complex problems from start to finish. Whereas our client service or business development team might be more motivated about innovating an entire industry and the future of connected TV, and working with inventory partnerships to completely redefine a category. So it's really understanding, using that journalism, like Rian said, really understanding what motivates the team that's currently on the ground and then the team we want to get into the building. So completely agree. It's more role-based than generational for us.
So I'm super excited about this next question too, which is really about pipelining. And as we know, unemployment is at historically high levels, and your pipeline probably is overflowing in some roles and not so much. You know, and those ill-fitting resumes may be wasting your time. Like, what role does employer brand have in making sure that you're getting quality candidates for the right role? And I will stay with you, Anna, since you're on the screen.
Okay, sure. Glad to continue. So we're still hiring key skills as we anticipate a growing demand for data-driven advertising. What helps us find the best fit for us from a talent perspective is really staying true to the value and behavioral competencies that we're looking for. So finding culture add, not necessarily culture fit, but having a really not only rigorous, but intentional interview process, because that helps us understand, even if it's virtual, if someone is going to really be successful and join the company, hit the ground running.
How about you, Nicole? Like, how are you dealing with maybe influx of resume and candidates, and making sure they have a good candidate experience, but maybe they aren't exactly the best fit for the roles you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really, you know, where employer brand kind of comes to life. It's a responsibility of ours to make sure that we're clear enough about what it's really like to work in our company. And that means right now doubling down on the messaging around what's good, bad, and ugly about being a part of your company. Because the people who are legitimately considering your business because they're interested already, they're sort of on that high end of engagement already, they're going to put a lot of time and energy into making applications right now. And if they're not going to be successful in that from the get-go, just, hey, A doesn't match B, then they should really have an opportunity to know that. And I think it's right now really holding firm on our messaging in our attraction campaigns to say, hey, this is what it's really like. I mean, for us, for instance, obviously, we're all working from home right now. It'd be super easy for us right now to make that seem like that was going to become a new norm at Qualtrics. But right now, and we don't have a permanent work from home policy. So we have to double down on that messaging to not make it seem like, oh yeah, that's what Qualtrics is going to become. This is who we are. This is the experience. It may be a little different right now, but you need to know that. And that's, I think, part of ensuring that the people who come into your pipelines have very clear messages on what their experience would be as an employee, and help them make better choices for if they really feel like they're going to fit in with your company. And you're always going to have people who apply outside of that. But if you can hold firm with those messages right now, you'll do a lot for your pipeline and for the quality of your candidate experience.
So I'm excited about where we're going next. And it's funny because we were naturally going there, but the questions are kind of pulling us into the direction of people really want to understand how talent acquisition and HR can work really effectively with marketing. So I'm going to read this next question, and I'll just start with you, Rian, because it actually came in while you were talking. So I think you must have kind of triggered something. So our person is trying to explain to a very busy marketing team that now is the time to work on branding and employment brand and recruiting brand, and that we can also, that all of them can reach a similar audience. But our person confesses that they're not being as successful as they would like, and I can feel you. So how, Ryan, do you think that we on the talent acquisition side need to make the appeal to marketing and comms to really buy into now is the time?
This has been a consistent struggle at every large B2C company that I've ever worked for. And it's like the initial, it almost feels like a impossible task. Like at first you're just like, how can I get people to care about this? But then honestly, what really helped me in all of these roles is either one, starting to work with an agency, and then suddenly marketing and brand wanted to get involved, or working with finding some advocates and some allies on that side and just saying like, hey, you've been here a long time, you've got a great story, you understand the brand really well, like can I partner with you on telling your story and telling the story of marketing and telling the story of design? And then, you know, employees really love to tell the story of working where they work, especially if they really love working there. So, you know, regardless, looping them in and having them be involved, even if you do go up with an agency at first, even if it's just something small, they'll see it, they'll see the impact, especially if you're starting to put things out on LinkedIn, or you're starting to get, you know, more traction with the employer brand. Eventually with all, you know, Squarespace, Pandora, and Instacart, I was able to work with the marketing team and the brand teams to create a specific visual identity and brand identity for our sort of sub brands, like you would for like a B2B brand or something within a company. But it's not easy at first. You just have to keep going for it. And honestly, sometimes ask permission, because there's going to be someone on design that sees something that goes out and they're like, no, you know, why did that go out? Like I could have gotten my hands on that and designed that better. And then they hopefully will, and you'll be able to go from there. But, you know, it's hugely important. It can take a little bit sometimes. If you use the B2C or B2B marketing analogy, I find that really helps. Like you wouldn't want to arm your salespeople with like not great information or visuals while they're going to market. Neither would you want to do that for your recruiters.
Great. Anna, how do you get convinced that marketing needs to pay attention to this?
It's me. It's so nice to hear other people are kind of one-person shows, because I'm like, yeah, I'm not alone. So for me, it's trying to bring as many people along the way with me. So Take Your Kids to Work Day is a good example. We had an in-office activation planned and said, okay, let's do something virtual. So we looked at what we could do with a virtual magician and had an EMEA, North America, and then a separate APAC call. And that was a really nice engagement tactic. But we said, let's take that a step further. How can Take Your Kids to Work Day be a message of unity and kind of we're all in this together in a very trade desk way? So we asked employees to share videos of their life at home with kids. And we got Zoom calls being interrupted, and head of product on a trampoline with his kids. And you really saw a beautiful snapshot into our employees' lives. And so we created a 1.5-minute video and then shared it out on social. So it was a way to say, okay, we're doing something to celebrate our people. We're going to capture it in a really trade desk way, and then we're going to share that externally. And it ended up being a really nice snapshot of who we are, and I think united the team first and foremost.
And I happened to see that video, and it's incredibly authentic. So it is just incredibly well done. And it feels like something that will go in a time capsule for what it was like in 2020. So Kate, I would love to ask you, so we had another question, like I'm sure you've never encountered this problem where your employer brand is in flux and maybe the mission is changing or certain elements of the culture are in transition. How do you put a stake in the ground when it's evolving so quickly?
I guess to sort of answer that in a way, ThoughtWorks is a company where, you know, there's a lot of personalities and we let that shine. We let the individuals speak, and we really, that's kind of like who we are at the core. But obviously, as you can imagine, with having 7,000 opinions and passions, it can become loud. So, you know, when going through the employer brand and kind of defining what that is for us, we made sure to create words and stories that people could use in their own language and, you know, really kind of take it in and define it for themselves and what it means for them as a thought worker, or, you know, if they've left as an ex-thought worker, and telling that story. So it's not necessarily putting a stake in the ground, but it's giving our employees the tools to define it themselves, but it remains consistent with what kind of the umbrella that we've defined as our culture and our values within the employer brand.
So I'm going to get you on the panel to raise your hand for this next one. And I'm sorry we're off on a tangent, but the questions are flooding in. You are all very, very popular, so I'm super excited. So we have quite a few, as we go back to our first poll, that, 43% are playing kind of defense and just trying to keep their pipeline warm. But how do they go about, doing that when, the message is, we're really on a hiring pause right now and for the unforeseeable future? Like, how do you create a brand and, market in that environment? So I'm just going to let you raise your hand if you feel good about taking that one. And if not, I will kind of tell you some best practices that we've learned from our clients and prospects. And the first thing is, if you're going to keep the job role up or the job posting up, definitely just add to the description, this is hiring in 2021, or just some indication of when you may really be able to turn that back on. Right now, I think candidates most appreciate authenticity and transparency. So I think that's what we can all do as marketers and talent acquisition professionals, is make sure that we're absolutely clear about what we're doing. The other thing is, you still have a culture to celebrate and you still have employee stories you want to tell, and those will be evergreen for even after this time. So I think I would, some of the best in class that we're working with, that's what they're focusing on, even if they are in a hiring pause. Okay, and so we've got so many questions about talent acquisition and marketing. So I'm going to kind of bucket these for the end because I think there's just a lot to unpack there. We do have community chats, and if you haven't attended one of those, they're really an open forum in a small group divided by market, where you can really discuss with your peers. And I think this would be a phenomenal topic for the next one. So continuing on. So I'd love to know if each of you could give me kind of your 3 takeaways. We talked a lot, like what would be the 3 things that you want people attending to this webinar to know about, or at least consider as they're building their plan for the rest of 2020? And I'm gonna start with you, Nicole.
I'm gonna go straight with, I only have 2, so sorry. But I think my first takeaway for anyone on this call right now is, if you haven't been working strategically on your employment brand, or you've been thinking about talent brand and how you haven't had time right now, like now is the time. Like this is the opportunity to be the ultimate prepper in gathering your talent brand resources, whether or not that's going, hey, I want to go ahead and get content from a particular team or different types of roles, to make sure that when we are back running at that particular team, they're super well equipped. Or hey, we're going to go ahead and run some really soft touch campaigns. If you've got a CRM, planning out how to use that in a way that allows you to do some of those consistent touches, I think would be really important. So prep, like, absolutely, I don't know, be ready for hibernation. I'm not sure what the great metaphor is for this one, but prepping is the big piece. And then the second one is start identifying the gaps in how your company has responded to COVID as an employer. And because we all have gaps, we all have places where we could have done better or we've done really well. And I think, whether or not you see that reported through your employee voice and reviews, whether that's in media or whatever, start to take some time to make some plans on what to do to address those gaps when you're hiring aggressively again, because candidates will remember whether or not they were a consumer or a candidate during this process. And if you are not aware and you haven't taken the time again to prep, you're going to get caught up with it when things sort of take a next step forward. So, like say, prep and identify those gaps to make some great plans for going forward.
That's wonderful. How about you, Kate?
Yeah, I don't know if I have exactly 3, but to kind of reiterate what Nicole is saying, I think it's definitely been a time where we've been able to not necessarily reset, but I think pivot on a lot of what we had planned. Because I think, like anyone, our plans have changed significantly from what we put down on paper in, say, November. And I think, what we're showcasing now from an employer brand standpoint is, you know, who we are as a company and how we've responded, which resonates not only with potential candidates, with our employees, but also our clients, customers, future clients and customers. And I think the big piece is that talking about kind of this differentiation between recruitment marketing and employer brand is that, you know, our recruitment marketing, my strategies has changed. What we had thought we were going to be doing this month is very different. But that's okay. We've adopted digital events. We've moved a lot of physical events to that. We've adjusted our content to be more around, you know, the personalities and what people are doing to adjust to this. And we know that when we're going to come out of this, there will be a new kind of the next normal, I guess. But I think that it's just showing our authenticity as a company, showing, you know, kind of a little vulnerability, and that we're all going through this together.
That's wonderful. How about you, Ryan? What 3 things do we need to remember?
1, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. 2, I would say, go for the low-hanging fruit at first. There's a lot of opportunity for you to be able to jump into things along the candidate experience process. Like, even, it doesn't have to be these huge gargantuan things to start. It can just be like, okay, we're going to tweak the automated kickback messaging that Greenhouse sends to candidates when they submit their resume to give them an idea of, like, maybe how long it will take, or if it will take longer than normal, or if they maybe just won't hear back from anyone at all, though hopefully that doesn't happen. So just giving people like an idea of actually what's happening now, or going to your career site and saying like, hey, these are weird times to be thinking about coming to a new company, but like, you know, we hope that you still apply, and here's a little bit about, you know, about how we're working right now. So just finding some of those opportunities. And then, you know, I'm typically someone who likes the ask for forgiveness, not permission, when it comes to employer brand and recruitment marketing. However, now is not the time to do that. It's really important to stay connected to your comms team, to your marketing team, and to really be tightly aligned across your organization, especially if you're a company like for Instacart, we're sort of in the swish of all the COVID things as an essential service. And so for us, that's hugely important for us. When we come out of this, I'll be able to take a little bit more liberties, I think, but right now it's really important to make sure that you're providing clear, accurate, and timely information to your candidates, and really to anyone.
How about Anna?
I love what everyone has said. I'm nodding along here. The first thing, I don't think it's ever been more important to be consistent. I find that once I get tired of saying the same thing over and over, the organization is picking it up and running with it. So when we launched our values, we really seeded it internally for a year. And now we're taking that into our interview questions and to the, you know, our external website and things like that. So stay really consistent. The second is also just be patient. Sometimes this change takes a long time to happen. So I love what Ryan said about the low-hanging fruit. What are the little impacts that reflect the humanity? I think what is interesting about this time is we're getting to see more sides of our teammates and our candidates, and to be humble and generous and more human will really go a long way. And if that's part of your culture, it's a great time to flex that.
That is wonderful. So that leads us to a couple more questions we have. And Kelsey, I'm sorry to you on the back end. We are completely off script now. So one of the questions we had is, I think we'd had a lot of questions around culture. And I think this highlighted in some firms that maybe the culture wasn't as strong as they thought. They didn't have anything to lean back on. I'll just let you kind of step in if you want to answer this one, but this person says, my company truly doesn't have a culture. With COVID, unless you work with someone, you might not be talking to coworkers. No happy hours, no social things, etc. How would you go about championing a culture or telling a story about culture when you don't really feel there is one? And I would say, I'll step outside of my role as a host, is the first thing is you probably need to start working on that. And sometimes it's an uphill battle if the leaders are not behind that. But anybody want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a Sisyphusian task, but yeah, that's tough. And I'm curious, like, I don't, if it's like if you're not having like happy hours or a culture, like, are you still like on the front lines? Are you still, is this like a hospital situation? Like, are you not able to, do you have, like, what does that look like? Or is it all online? I think if it's everyone working remotely and And digitally, I mean, there are ways to connect with people, like start your own sort of like grassroots organic, like happy hours, clubs, things like that for shared interests. But you really do need the support of a leadership team. And so I think just being loud about that, like you need to have some like almost like executive sponsors for like culture, as like lame as this might sound, like having like a fun committee or whatever, like that helps, like that starts, that gets the ball rolling somewhere. And just finding those ways to connect. Like at Instacart, we have virtually social. It's one of our Slack channels, and employees will like jump in and host like, you know, meditation sessions or yoga or whatever that is. And we also have a bunch of different shared interests. When I was at Pandora, we had Pandora little hobby groups and stuff that people would join and get some money from HR to fund those hobbies. But there's different ways to connect, but you really like, if you're not in HR, then that's like not your responsibility to be doing this. And you should be pushing for folks in HR or like an executive sponsor to be helping you with this, because that's a lot of work.
Great. And so now we're on messaging, and you know, no good brand discussion can not address messaging. And so I think a lot of people, we've actually had 3 or 4 questions about this. So maybe they did a riff in early March, late March, April, and then now as we're really thinking about returning to work and what that looks like, the messaging is changing. And so now they're going to start hiring rapidly. How do anybody have thoughts about how you would message that things are changing? And honestly, I think that's the message if I were doing the marketing, because, you know, not many people were really prepared for this. And I think we all are just kind of having to fly by the seat of our pants sometimes. And I love your don't make plans. Ryan, so anybody want to talk about like how you would go about messaging, perhaps if you have done a RIP and now you're thinking about restarting hiring? Any thoughts on that? I mean, I would just say from the marketing and messaging side is you just have to be transparent that, you know, we had to make some tough choices early on for the viability of the business. And, you know, now we're excited that we can turn that back on. So, but I'm sure your marketing team has very strong plan or thoughts on that. So I would connect with them. And so now let's just move into, you know, have you seen other companies? Like, I always love to learn from example. Like, which companies do you think are doing a really good job of this during this time, like in telling their brand story and maybe communicating authentically? And I'm just gonna go backwards. So I'll start with you, Anna.
Yeah, sure. I first found out about the impact of the Airbnb layoffs through LinkedIn posts of people that I love working with, and they shared with such beautiful gratitude what their experience had meant, what they're looking forward to next. And it was consistent because I found, oh, actually, I know a few people who work at Airbnb, and it was because of their really deep shares about the experience. So I thought they've handled that beautifully, and also given their staff kind of a soft landing and working with other recruitment teams to find them roles. So I think that's been a really beautiful example of handling something that has been really difficult and completely unforeseen.
Great. How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I echo the sentiments on Airbnb. I don't know if anyone else has seen like the microsite that they built for their employees that basically talks about their employees' skills and like how to get in touch with them. But it's like beautifully designed, you know, and a lot of companies have sort of the spreadsheets and stuff, which is awesome, and like people connecting, and like I've seen Toast do this, and you know, Uber's done this and stuff too. But Airbnb really actually has created like their whole thing is creating like beautiful experiences. I'm not quite sure what their mission statement is, but I would assume it's something close to that. But they've really created a beautiful experience for the employees that they had to let go. And I think how you treat your employees when you're in a situation like a RIF or reduction in force or anything like that, like it's that says a lot about your brand, because if you can do that in a way that's ethical and that's kind and that's above and beyond in whatever way you can, says a lot about the culture. And I'm excited to see Airbnb bounce back from this.
Great. How about you, Kate? Who are you admiring during these times?
I was trying to think. I'm like, I think just as anybody that's really, you know, to echo that, is anyone that's really come out front and honest with any changes that they've had to experience. and not hiding, and then obviously treating their employees ethically. I think allowing them, you know, I've seen via LinkedIn, you know, people that are actively trying to maybe help some employees that are furloughed or laid off, and getting them in touch with other recruiters who, you know, are trying to find. So I think this like sense of community that people are banding together is really great to see. And again, it's just that being honest and leading with empathy. So, you know, when you see a company lead with that, you still have a good sentiment towards them, even though they've had to make some really hard decisions in light of this.
I love that, because that's something that even the smallest company can do, is really think about leading with empathy and, you know, allow their employees to help maybe employees that have been impacted on finding their next role. How about you, Nicole? Who is doing well in your eyes?
Oh gosh, I think, you know, there's not a huge amount to add. I've seen so many different examples between spreadsheets, websites, whatever, of people trying to really proactively re-engage their workforce with other opportunities, just heavily networking, and that's been going really well. You know, we've seen a lot of companies that work with us, you know, really designing cultures of action where they are, you know, decidedly taking feedback or you know, seeing what their employee experience is looking like and responding to it, and not just going, hey, really sorry, but really, you know, remembering that this is a human experience and treating it as such. And that's been really great to see.
Yeah, I think so. Then our next question really gets us back on the culture topic. And I will say this one, it actually struck my heart, because who is having Zoom fatigue? Just feel free to raise your hand if you like. Yeah, I think everybody is. And so this question is really about that when it first, you know, we first decided we were going to work from home, everybody was coming to the happy hours, they were doing online yoga, and now that's kind of dropped off dramatically. And I think there's a worry that that may be impacting the culture. And I'd love your thoughts on it. I certainly have an opinion that sometimes culture is taking your space away, and being able to just be yourself and not be kind of forced into that situation. And it's okay if people may be opting out, just as long as we're checking in and seeing how our teammates are doing. But I'd love to know your thoughts. You know, Anna, I mean, you just left New York, and that has to be difficult. So any thoughts on, you know, how do you continue to build culture in the era of Zoom fatigue?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. I think it's thinking about other ways that we can come together and share. So if we have a makers channel and people are putting up what they're doing on the weekends or interesting projects and hearing about people's lives outside of work, I've gone kind of old school where my one-on-one with my manager, I ask, can we just have a regular phone call and have just kind of an old school convo? We don't need to share documents. We don't need to look at our own hair, you know, as we're speaking. And I think that's really helpful. We were just a part of the Unilever United for America initiative, and we said, great, let's do a virtual happy hour with new hires, and we can do these thank you notes to people who are working at the food banks. And all of us kind of said, can we just do it? And then everyone can have this nice, thoughtful, generous experience on their own time. It takes 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be this big virtual get together. And I think just being open and honest and the pulse of how people are feeling will really help. And finding other ways, whether it's images or old school phone conversations, to come together and remember that you're not alone.
Perfect. Anyone else want to add to that?
I'd say don't just do a Zoom happy hour and just be like, have a Zoom happy hour, and then like have there be like nothing, you know, because it's just like a bunch of random people in a room trying to have a conversation, and that does not work on Zoom. I think if you can have something like, we're going to do meditation, we're going to do yoga, or there's going to be an agenda, we're going to have this discussion topic, you know, I think that is interesting. But then otherwise, yeah, take a break. Zoom is exhausting. It's like you're watching TV and TV is watching you back. And I've actually like had a couple like tips for Zoom when you're in meetings with someone. Like if you can make your screen big and then you minimize all of the participants and the people that you see, and including seeing yourself, I find that to be much less exhausting, because then I'm just focused on the one person and not like everyone else and myself. And, you know, it's just, it can be really bizarre. But, you know, I think if you have the ability to to push leadership in your company too, to give your employees like a mental health day off or something like once a month, or think about summer Fridays, just time away from the screens is really important, or like just being really clear on your team about how to help with that. So our team does walk and talk meetings outside every Tuesday and Thursday, which is really helpful just to get an eye break, because it can be a lot.
That's wonderful. Okay, well, we're coming up on the end, so I have one more question, and this actually came for our audience. Is as you think about your employer brand and you want to amplify it, like which channels are really important to you? And I'll start with you, Nicole.
My core three, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are important for us for a variety of different reasons. You know, we look to Instagram because we have our best diversity in that space, and we're able to tell, you know, the story that our employees want to tell, which we're able to do across all the channels. But, you know, those core three places are really spaces for us to speak as Qualtrics Life, and that's kind of where we share that story. We leave a lot of the networking and everything else within LinkedIn to our employees and what they want to authentically share, because realistically their networks are looking to hear from them. So we look to provide them, you know, things that they can share if they're interested, but that's not actually a key place for us. So really the big three is where we focus.
And how about you, Kate?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we use your typical social channels and, you know, email and nurture, but I think for us, the importance are really the people. So from candidates to, you know, new to learning about ThoughtWorks, to current employees, and then to alumni or networks and clients, and having them being really important for the brand ambassadors and spreading that message. I think that kind of word of mouth sometimes tends to be some of the most powerful to reiterate or to introduce ThoughtWorks story.
Wonderful. And I want to thank so many of you for being on the line, and our panelists for giving us a little bit of your Zoom mind share today. We really appreciate it. I do hope you go have a nice walk around the block or take some time for yourself. And just as we're wrapping up, I just want to let you know that we are going to be sending out the recording. We do have a survey that's going to come along with that, and we will share the results of that survey with all of you who have attended and our panelists, just so we can all hear what our peers are thinking about. So please complete that survey. We promise we'll share whatever we learn from it. We'll send the recording. We'll also send you some of our best in class content that has been co-authored by a lot of your peers, and so really appreciate that. And then I think this topic of culture is really going to be important for our next webinar in June. So we'll be talking with several leaders about the future of work and how that's kind of upon us a lot more quickly than we thought. So stay tuned for that June webinar. And if you'd like to learn more about Built-In, feel free to reach out to us. If you have any questions or suggestions for me, please feel free to email me at sheridan.org@builtin.com. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks for spending the time with us. Thank you to our panelists.